something like this because of the fanatism or the engineering of the destruction of these ideas. They're tearing down statues. Do you think they can't burn down books? Right? Knowledge wins always. Right? Clarity, reason, knowledge, but it takes effort. It takes somebody to struggle. If nobody can struggle, if we're simply letting them do you think that we will be safe? Don't you realize how quickly the world is changing and how much we're not equipped in proportion to the degree of knowledge that we need to be aware of the course that things have taken. Um, so historically, we could make many other points of how this happened, etc. I would just add that modernity is fine as long as you make things work scientifically. Secularization is fine as long as you are able to convince people of faith and the existence of God and the necessity of such order, not if you impose it forcefully, right? Albeit in some circumstances it could be deemed, let's say there are some levels of approximations which people think say better that than, I don't know, terrorist ideologies. Yes, but it shouldn't be an out. In fact, what I'm actually picturing you here is not that there is a good tradition that was always strong and brave and pure. No, there was a delusion, right? There are just humans that became lazier and lazier, and as a matter of fact, decided all of the sudden that this stuff was all superstition. And the reason why they thought it was superstition is not because they knew or they had studied it. By the 18th to 19th century, I think that many people properly began to lose track of the meaning of these things. That is to say, it's not that they, an atheist in the Enlightenment would look at religion and say, I have found some flaws in it. No, they were just complaining essentially with the fact that some states had just nobility and the clergy ruling everything in a corrupt fashion, because also they had corrupted themselves, even though they stuck to tradition and they believed it was the best thing. And I agree with them. They had lost themselves moral resources because of science and had made their life easier, and they had not thought to back that softening with some greater keeping up the moral force on the base of the same science. This is what is still happening today. So the two things are not an alternative, right? They should always work together, because what kind of motivation do you have if you don't understand things? That's why the hero of the Indo-European pantheon is a wise person. It's not just a strong. It's not a bodybuilder. He's just, even actually kind of an old man that, however, knows things and knows how to take action. Having taken action before, knowing what this needs to be done or not. In other words, it's the myth of Prometheus as well. It's the same thing, that Prometheus is given a power that is exemplified by a sort of technology of science, of knowledge, the secret of fire, that was, by the way, the sacred one of the Indo-European. It came from the skies, right? To a popular hero, to a chthonic, pelagic, telluric hero who didn't know what to do with that. So he gave it to humans, and humans began to kill each other, to make swords, to fire. So we could say we have nuclear weapons today in the same way, and these masses do not have the idea of how to use them. So Prometheus is damned by the gods, and this myth represents the gods of heaven, by the way, and the gods of heaven in this sense cannot do anything, because this represents in the Indo-European mythology, of course, also the realization that the vulgus, the plebs, the masses exist, and so they are dangerous, and you can't really do much with them, and that's why the struggle continues. It's never over. Instead, people think that the struggle is over, like when the Cold War ended. We thought that we would win people with what? With socio-economical stuff. Why? Because even conservatives were schooled in places in the West that had been taken over by Marxists, that were ideologically just pushing the materialistic lie, so that they even alleged conservatives thought, just give them McDonald's, they will not commit genocide. And how stupid you can be. That tells you the reason why, of course, there is no moral worth in being part of the average, right? In the moment in which you content to be average, you basically condemn yourself to be always to have the downhand, right? To be from the weaker side, to be the passive side, because you have lost initiative, you have lost the strength, you've stopped struggling, and therefore you will succumb. This is the only panorama that you can see in the process. When the French Revolution arrived, capital, let's say, example, the elite was corrupt, right? There is no doubt there was a great value in that elite, theoretically. That there were some values that were dramatically important. France had been, after all, one of the most successful countries in that sense, for reasons that are complex to explain now, but they had to do, even the way the elite was kind of more robust morally than in other places, albeit the masses were kind of larger and more subordinated to it, which makes the whole building frail, and this is why the revolution happened there in the first place, and in other countries didn't quite happen in the same way. And so the fact that it ended is not a positive thing theoretically. In practice it was, really, because it spread ideas that were still about equality, was about the idea of that the equality could be reached, let's say, not equality per se, but of course the French were parading that, but let's say through that lie they were unlocking the concept that everybody that didn't count anything, if demonstrating to be superior morally, could become somebody. And frankly, if you look at the moral strength displayed by the French revolutionary armies when they were under siege by all the other powers of Europe, the great guards of tradition, you see that they demonstrated an enormous moral force, and not just as masses, right? So it's a question that cannot be just reduced to, you can sclerotize the factions in the process and pretending that is how it's always been. This has to do principally with the degree of moral force, which is, again, what we have underestimated also from a civilizational point of view. A country does not become a normal country because it's namely not communist anymore, for example, or because it's just so rich so it has always to be good. It doesn't work like that. It takes a real civilization to develop structurally an enormous moral strength on the base of morality and science combined. And the resources for this in our massive society seem to be lacking dramatically. We are just living at the journey, like whatever happens is, like, let's hope we can put a patch on it. And generally speaking, civilization does work like this, but it's also the reason why we have grown entirely, weaker, because there's nobody really has proportionally made a step that was, positively longer than the patches that were put to try to fix the mistakes at the end of the day and the incompetence, the weakness, and the dysfunctionality of the communities that evidently weren't provided really with a great moral force, right? So this video is, excruciatingly long, so I will try to quit it, but let's say in the same way as I was saying, secularization is shouldn't be about demonizing religion as it's become. I haven't talked about atheism in this video, but atheism, let's say, has taken more like a meaning of anti-theism. And in my opinion, theism or atheism do not quite exist. Like, they don't mean anything by themselves. What we're witnessing is theism and anti-theism, but in the same sclerotized forms of, like, oversimplified ideas of what theism and atheism actually mean, and misunderstanding the fact that we are actually both believing or disbelieving at the same time, and that, that's even so simple to understand when you have a minimal, even religious understanding, also on a historical base, and when it doesn't become blind factionalism, when, again, the fourth state is brought to believe just because you are of a religion or a certain country or a certain race or whatever, you're special. because you're not. Because if you don't make any effort individually, you're not special at all. As a matter of fact, you are worthless. And you should pay the consequences, just that unfortunately this undermines the whole community fabric, because we should be strong together, and that was also one of the ancestral principles, that community had to be always intelligent and courageous to cooperate, to understand what was the moment to do, like to be determined, right, to do what was necessary, and not just quarreling all the time, because that's a form of weakness. And it's one of in practical terms, historically, like political division is it's the greatest weakness, even in every field, right, including and especially the military one. And also, I will not talk about multiculturalism and communitarism as nationalist, socialist ideologies, at least being part of that dichotomy, because they are just framed in the same concept. But you understand why, because multiculturalism, it's a bit schizophrenic. First says that there are certain different cultural backgrounds that are just immutable in a way, so buying even to communitarism in a way, and then saying you should blend everything together to make everything disappear, because the individual should become a monad. And communitarism simply saying that communities never change, as if identities, cultures, whatever, were not just an enormously complex process of intertwinement, stratification, and consolidation and a change of an extremely wide range of things that have nothing to do with a fixed reality. And of course, if you don't study history, you can't really understand either of them, and why this stems obviously from a nationalist statalist delusion that is a cheap oversimplification of the whole thing. Alright, so I think today I let out really a lot of stuff that I don't know how it's gonna be received, but I'm going to do this often because I want to drive away as many misunderstanding as possible, so that whoever follows the channel can have a really a sounder understanding of where I come from with this stuff, and why you can't really compromise on these topics, and why this mindset is really crucial in order to realize what happens, and why there is no time, why everything depends on you, and why any form of relativism is defeat per se, right? And today I talked a lot, but also there was a lot within the stuff, and so I will come to address these topics in a more orderly fashion, given the same one, and I hopefully will be more precise, more complete, and more compact also on the specific ones. Alright, for today I stop here. Just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it, otherwise leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. I thank you heartily for listening to me. See you next time. Bye.